Here's a question I want you to sit with for a second. If I called your 3 best clients right now and asked them to describe what you do in 1 sentence, what would they say? Not what you'd hope they say, but what they'd actually say. Most practice owners that I work with, when they really think about that question, get a little uncomfortable because they know their clients love them. They know their work is good, but they're not confident the description coming back will be clear, specific, and repeatable between how good you actually are and how clearly that gets communicated to the people around you. That's what this video is about. I call it the perception gap, and fixing it is the single most important strategic move private practice owners can make right now. If you watched the first 2 videos in this series, you've seen what's happening in the market. Gym chains building clinical infrastructure, hospital systems tightening referral networks, a consolidating landscape that's putting real pressure on private practice owners. And you've seen 3 real examples of private practices that not only survived that pressure, they grew through it. By getting specific, by becoming known primarily for one thing instead of trying to serve everyone. What I didn't tell you in those previous videos is that the strategic moves those practices made, getting narrower and more referable, only work if you can close the perception gap. Because here's the truth. You can have the sharpest positioning in the market and still lose clients, referrals, and opportunities if the people around you can't describe what you do in a way that travels. I know this from my own experience. A few years ago, I was doing some brand work and some design work and some consulting, primarily in the health and wellness space. The work was good, the clients were happy, but if you asked my family what I did through my business, you'd get a pretty consistent answer. Oh, Bryan's an artist. He paints, he does some sculpting, and he designs some logos, which is true. I do those things, but it's not my primary focus professionally. And the fact that the people closest to me couldn't describe my work accurately told me something important. If they couldn't describe it, strangers certainly couldn't do it. And if strangers couldn't describe it, referrals weren't traveling in the way that they needed to. So I decided to come up with a process. I did the work. I sat with the uncomfortable question of what I actually do, who it's actually for, and how to say it in a way a 10-year-old could understand and repeat. It definitely took longer than I expected. There were a lot of almost right versions, but eventually I landed on 1 sentence that felt true and clear enough that it might actually work. Then I tested it on my mom. She understood it, and she felt seen and equipped now to accurately share what I do with others and how I help them, even if it's not primarily through traditional art. That was the moment I knew I'd close the perception gap with core family members. I originally called this process the mom test, but now I call it the transfer test, and I use it with every practice owner I work with. The idea is simple. A message passes the transfer test when someone who heard it once can repeat it accurately to someone else without you in the room. And realistically, someone may not always say it word for word, but it's also simple enough that if it's paraphrased, it doesn't lose its meaning. It's clear enough that the person they tell understands what you do, who it's for, and why it matters. That's the bar. It sounds basic, but it's definitely not easy. Here's what a message that fails the transfer test sounds like in the real world. A referring physician tells a patient, "You should see my colleague. She's a dietitian. She's really good." That's a warm referral, but it's not a transfer test pass. The patient doesn't know what she's good at. They don't know if she's the right fit. They're making a decision with almost no useful information. Here's what a transfer test pass sounds like. "You should see my colleague. She works specifically with women who are managing blood sugar issues and want to get off medication without losing their quality of life. That's literally all she does." Now the patient knows if they're the right person. The referral is qualified before it even arrives, and the practice owner didn't have to be in the room for any of it. That's what specific positioning does. It makes your referral network work for you, even if you're not actively working. So how do you close the gap? Here's where I want to give you something practical before this video ends. The first step is identifying the gap. Not fixing it yet, just naming it honestly. There are 2 sides to the gap. The first side is how you are currently perceived. Not how you want to be perceived, how you actually are right now by the people who know you, refer you, and interact with your practice. Your current clients, your referral sources, the people in your professional network who would describe you if someone asked. The second side is how you need to be perceived in order to close the gap and grow the practice you actually want. Not a vague aspiration, a specific, honest description of the person you do your best work for and the outcome that they get from working with you. The gap between those two things is your work. Here's the exercise I want you to do before my next video. In the first column, write down how you currently describe yourself, how you think you're currently described by your referral sources and your existing clients. Be honest, not harsh, just accurate. In the second column, write down how you need to be described for the right new clients to find you, recognize themselves in your message, and say yes. Then ask yourself, could someone who heard my current message once repeat it accurately to a friend? If the answer is no, or if you hesitate before answering, you have a gap worth closing. Here's what I want you to take away from this video. The practices winning right now, the ones we looked at in video B, didn't win because they had better clinical skills than their competition. They won because they got clear on one thing and communicated it in a way that traveled. That clarity is available to any private practice owner who's willing to do the work at identifying the gap and closing it. But I also want to be honest with you. The identifying is uncomfortable. The closing is harder. Many practice owners I've talked to have tried to do this on their own, but have wound up with something that was accurate but didn't travel well. Because clarity about your own work is one of the hardest things to develop from the inside. That's the work I do with practice owners. We find the gap, we build the message, we make sure it passes the transfer test before it goes anywhere. If you've watched all 3 videos in this series and you're thinking, I know I have a gap and I don't want to spend another year talking around it, there's a link below for you to book a call with me. It's a real conversation, no pitch deck, just clarity on where your practice is and whether or not working together makes sense. If you're not ready for that yet, subscribe. I'm building out more of this framework in future videos, and I want you to have it when it drops. I'm Bryan Butler. I help allied health founders become the obvious choice without trying to serve everyone. See you at the next video.